dude. Don't come through the door. I will shoot.
Hi, I'm Joel Persinger. I'm the Gun Guy. Thank you very much for all of your support of GunGuyTV. I am super duper grateful. Make sure you check us out on these additional platforms because YouTube demonetizes us, demonizes us, and shadow bans us. And so if you check us out on Twitter and Rumble, or any of the other ones, they're all listed here. Please do. Also, check out the GunGuyTV audio podcast. We do it a couple of times a month, and you can find that on Rumble or Twitter if you want the video version. The audio version is available on all your favorite podcast players. And so Twitter is X. Sorry about that. I keep saying Twitter. Eventually, I'll get it to X. Who knows? I got an interview today with Chuck Michel from CRPA and Michel and Associates and the Second Amendment Law Center. Lots of different hats. We're going to talk about some stuff going on in California. Specifically, we will talk about SB2, which is the new provision making or trying to make all of California a sensitive place. AB 28, which is the 11% tax that they want to put on the purchase of firearms and pretty much everything else related, apparently. And also we'll talk about what the magazine ban is doing in the Ninth Circuit and the crazy antics. It seems like the Ninth Circuit is trying to they're just bending over backwards trying to defeat us. I don't think they're going to be able to, but we will find out. So before I prognosticate when I shouldn't, let's go talk to Chuck. Chuck, thank you very much for joining me. I really do appreciate it. We got a lot to talk about in California. California is getting more interesting by the day. Hopefully, I've got some good questions. I think I do. I read the Van Dyke, I read the decision to stay Judge Benitez's excellent decision with regard to the mag ban and Duncan, I think. And then I read also the dissent, which everybody's raving about the dissent, and I get it. I kind of raved about it too, but that's just me. So where do we stand, though, with that case with the whole magazine thing? I guess the number one question people are asking me is, can I go out and buy magazines right now?
No, there is no Freedom Week this time around. Yeah. DOJ learned from its mistakes last time and basically asked for the stay as part of its papers, kind of anticipating that it was going to lose. And Judge Benitez recognized that they're allowed to ask the Ninth Circuit. So he granted their stay this time for 10 days to give them time to go to the Ninth Circuit and ask for a stay there. And so that's what the state did. It asked the Ninth Circuit Court to stay Judge Benitez's ruling while the case is on appeal. Now, the most interesting part of this is, folks may recall, the last time around we won in front of Judge Benitez. This was 6 or so years ago when we first filed this case. And it has a long history in the courts. We basically are litigating it twice. It started in the trial court. Judge Benitez ruled in our favor. It went to the 3-judge panel in the Ninth Circuit. We won. It went en banc to the 11-judge panel. We lost 7-4. We went to the Supreme Court and asked them to take the case and overturn the en banc ruling. Rather than do that, they held the case until Bruin came down. When Bruin came down, they granted review in Duncan, but instead of addressing it on the merits, they just vacated the lower court, the en banc panel's decision, remanded it, sent it back down to the lower court panel saying, reconsider your ruling in light of what we just said in Bruin. Rather than litigate it directly in the en banc panel from the Supreme Court, the en banc panel sent it back down to Judge Benitez. So Judge Benitez just ruled again, this time applying the Bruin standard, that the magazine possession ban is unconstitutional. And in the process, he made some great findings. The state has been making some really outrageous stretches in their arguments, trying to claim that use of a firearm, common use, only means when you actually pull the trigger, that magazines are not arms. Remember, Bruin says, and Heller says, that it's not just bearable arms that are protected, and not just firearms. It's the related activities. So you can't have a barrel ban and still have a Second Amendment. You can't have a trigger ban and still have a Second Amendment, and you can't have a magazine ban and still have a Second Amendment. Plus all the related activities, going to the range, taking it in for repair, competitive shooting, recreational shooting, hunting, all of that is protected by the Second Amendment. But the states are trying to argue that only guns commonly used for self-defense, and by used, again, they mean pull the trigger, those are the only guns protected. It's really shameful, frankly, how far they're trying to stretch Bruin, how hard they're trying to distort Bruin. Anyway, so Benitez's decision is wonderful. It brought tears to my eyes a couple of times. It was like a golden buzzer audition on America's Got Talent. That's how great this was. So everybody should read that, because it's really a kind of a history lesson and a heritage lesson. So he granted this 10-day stay because the state had asked for it, along with their opposition to his getting ready to grant the injunction. Then they went to the Ninth Circuit, and the Ninth Circuit granted a 10-day an administrative stay as opposed to stay on the substance. But the most important thing is, or the most significant thing is, that the en banc panel took it back. They skipped over the 3-judge panel. Now, there are lots of theories about why. The en banc panel does have the right to take what's called a comeback case. They can take that case without going through the 3-judge panel again. But some of the dissents that were filed saying that we shouldn't grant this stay said, hey, why are you skipping the 3-judge panel? Well, implicit in the dissent is the reason you're skipping the 3-judge panel is because you know they would win there. And you want to take it up en banc, where we lost last time 7-4, because the judges think they have a better chance of stopping the case. So some of the dissents were very, very heated. There's some very heated exchanges between some of the judges on why they shouldn't grant this stay and why it should have gone to the 3-judge panel before it went right back to the en banc. So the good thing is, the silver lining is, we just skipped about 2 years worth of litigation in front of the 3-judge panel.
Well, that was going to be my question. So did they just shoot themselves squarely in the foot if they want to oppose the decision from Benitez by skipping a 3-judge panel and making it a faster process to take this back to the Supreme Court if we need to go there? That's what it seems to me.
Yes. The Duncan case just jumped to the front of the line. There's dozens of Second Amendment cases being litigated across the country. There's a couple that are either at the circuit court level or en banc in other circuits, but very few. And so there's maybe 3 that are lined up for Supreme Court review, and Duncan is going to be right up there at the front of the line for a Supreme Court review. And the dissents that came down from the stay request. And by the way, we filed an opposition. Remember, it was an administrative stay, which is just procedural. Then they have to decide if they should stay it on the merits. So the state filed their brief saying plaintiffs can't win, and we filed our opposition saying, oh, yes, we can, and you should not stay this case. So there's going to have to be another ruling on the request for the merits stay as opposed to the administrative stay. I know this is getting a little wonky.
No, that's okay. So I want to, and forgive me, I think your audio is breaking up a little bit, not too bad. So you're still intelligible, so that's fine. There's nothing to fix there. I think it'll work out. But I think the interesting thing about that is that one of them, the merit stay actually has to judge the merits of whether one party or the other would win, doesn't it?
Yes. Well, whether there's a likelihood. So they're going to. It's not dispositive. Obviously, that only happens finally after it's heard in front of the whole panel, and they issue a ruling. But they're not supposed to. You have to argue back and forth about whether or not you're likely to win, and so they should stay it because there's no chance the state, or very little chance the state's going to win. And that's what we did in our opposition. I think people will get a kick out of that too. So that's all on our website, along with everything else that's been filed. But so now there's this argument about the stay on the merits, whether it's the injunction should be allowed to go into effect, or whether they're going to wait until after the en banc panel rules. I I don't know. I can't predict with 100% certainty, but I think the en banc panel will probably leave the stay in place, which, remember, there's two parts to this. There's the original ban on bringing more magazines into the state that allowed people who had them before that law went into effect to keep them. So there was a grandfather clause. And then Prop 63 wiped out the grandfathering protection and said nobody could have these. You have to get rid of them. And so what they've done up to this point in time is allowed the people who were grandfathered in to keep them, but also continue to ban the importation of any new ones, with the exception of that glorious little week there brought to you courtesy of the CRPA Freedom Week, where probably 1 million magazines were brought into the state. And the state and the Attorney General pointed that out. They're like, if you don't stay this, people are going to buy them. Well, yeah, they are, because there's pent-up demand, and these are the best magazines for use with your particular firearm. But anyway, so we'll see what happens. But the point I'm trying to make is that all of these arguments, these dissents, all become fodder for a Supreme Court considering whether or not to grant certiorari and accept the case for review. And when you've got all these judges saying that there's all these, games being played and things aren't being done right or considered properly, that all just becomes part of your petition to the Supreme Court to hear the case, where you say, look at what these judges are saying. You should resolve this issue at the Supreme Court level. So there's a very good chance that the Supreme Court could wind up hearing this case.
Which brings up a couple. Well, first of all, I want to clarify one thing. So now you got folks who've had magazines since before the ban, and you got folks who bought magazines that hold more than 10 rounds during Freedom Week.
Right.
What's the status of those magazines as we sit right now? I mean,
those are still legal. Those were legally acquired, and they're legal to continue to possess.
Okay, so the current status of things does not change really, because at one point I know the Attorney General sent out a letter to all law enforcement agencies saying the whole thing was pretty much unenforceable because they couldn't tell which mag was what.
Right.
And so I guess we're kind of in the same boat. Nothing's really changed except that, well, nothing's changed. You still can't legally get more of them.
Correct.
Right? But the ones that you have are still legal.
Yes, but be careful, because there are ways, in some cases, you can look at the lot number on a magazine and figure out when it was produced and figure out whether or not it was in existence before or during the time of Freedom Week or before the law came into effect. And LAPD and DOJ and other law enforcement agencies go to gun shows in Nevada or Arizona or wherever, and they look for California license plate numbers, and they will run your plate, get a picture of your ID, your California driver's license, see if they can find you in the show, see if they can find you buying magazines, and then they will follow you back across state lines and arrest you.
Okay, so if you actually did have them, I'll just say it this way: if you actually legitimately did possess them before the original ban, or you actually legitimately acquired them during Freedom Week, no side shenanigans. If that's the case, we know those are legal to possess, use, whatever. Okay. So that was the one question. The other is the Ninth Circuit. I don't want to beat up on the Ninth Circuit, but I want to beat up on the Ninth Circuit. Wait a minute. Nobody heard that. The Ninth Circuit has this habit of playing games and pulling shenanigans, in my humble opinion. How long can they hold this case without doing anything with it? I mean, now they've got it, and they say, oh, well, we're going to take it en banc. Can they hold on to it in perpetuity and never decide it? I mean, how long are we going to wait on this thing?
They could try, but in other cases where there other circuits have tried to play that game, like Antonuk in New York, when they've gone in for an emergency relief from the Supreme Court. Remember, there's two ways you can get relief from the Supreme Court. You can ask for an emergency order staying a court ruling, or you can actually try and get it accepted with a petition for a writ of certiorari, and then it's briefed on the merits. So the emergency order requests are called the shadow docket. So in Antonuk and some other cases, they've gone into the the Supreme Court and said, we need emergency relief because this, isn't right. And in that case, the Second Circuit was going to sit on it. And the Supreme Court said, well, we're not going to grant that relief right now, but we'll be watching Second Circuit. And if you don't hustle, we'll revisit this. So all these circuits are on notice that the Supreme Court is saying, move this stuff along, don't play this delay game. And if the en banc panel in Ninth Circuit in Duncan tries to delay it, we will go to the Supreme Court and ask for emergency relief, pointing that out.
And then the Supreme Court will either take it or light a fire under their rump and say, you got to do this and get it done.
Exactly.
Okay, so we're not in this situation where this thing could just sit there in the dusty old moldy never touch it file over at Ninth Circuit. They're going to have to do something with it, or they're going to be called into account by the Superior Court to force them to do so. So how long are we talking about, do you think, before they actually do anything with it?
Oh, God,
I'm asking you to prognosticate about
2 weeks,
court
2
schedules.
weeks.
Yeah, right, sure.
It's not going to be, 90 days, 3 months, 4 months, something like that, I would expect.
Before they hear argument or before they make a decision?
I would say they're probably going to hear argument within 3 months. And then we'll have a decision. Well, this is, I can never predict. And every time I do, I get it wrong. So because the court can do what they want. But look at the Seventh Circuit. They've been sitting on that case for since June. So they can delay. And
okay, so I'm not going to let you loose on it. So here you go. So inside, outside, good case, best case, worst case as far as.
You want the over under?
Yeah.
The under is 90 and the over is 6 months.
Okay, that's not too bad actually. It's frustrating, but it's not like 4 years or something. So that's super helpful. So with the magazine ban, we lost at the en banc panel just barely the last time, right?
Well, 7-4.
Okay, so how many votes, given the change in the test? Now they got the court. Now the burden's on the state. How many votes do we have to flip in order to win this time?
2, so it's 6-5.
What do you? I mean,
that should be doable. I mean,
I was just going to say, do you think that that's doable?
Well, unless they completely distort, and the en banc panel has not ruled on what the appropriate Bruin methodology is yet. We got the Tedder case on butterfly knives where a 3-judge panel got the methodology right, and the state of Hawaii has asked for en banc review. This is actually the big thing that's going on in the Ninth Circuit right now. What is the methodology? Is the Ninth Circuit going to get the methodology right? The methodology is you ask a question. It's not a test, it's a question. Is the conduct that's being regulated protected by the Second Amendment? And that we talked about earlier. All the ancillary activities, hunting, ranges, whatever, those are all protected, not just particular types of firearms or arms. And they don't have to, not just those that are commonly used. Even if it's not commonly used, it could still be protected as a bearable arm. But then the question becomes, okay, if it's covered by the language, keep and bear, then what's the next step? The next step is the burden shifts to the government to prove that there was a historical law that is similar enough to this modern day law that it would indicate that in 1791, the founding fathers would tolerate this modern law. They would have tolerated something like this then. And if they can find a historical analog, then the law can be constitutional. But if they can't, it's not. That's a very straightforward kind of thing. And people get this common use test wrong, I think, because there is no common use test per se. There is a historical analog test. And Heller said that if a particular class of guns that they're trying to ban is in common use for lawful purposes, not just self-defense, lawful purposes, then there's no historical analog where a historical law banned guns that were in common use for lawful purposes. There is no law from
so that whole thing actually isn't anything on their favor. It basically tosses the whole analog issue out the door if it's in common use.
For lawful purposes. And that's why they're so afraid of what use means. That's why they want to limit use to pulling the trigger. Not just, I have a gun in my nightstand right now in a quick access lockbox, even though I don't have kids in the house. But I'm using it right now. And this is what Benitez explained. It's in use right now.
because if anybody tries to come in and do me or my family harm, it's there for me to then take out and further use if necessary. Hopefully it's never necessary. You know, most of the time people run away as soon as you tell them you have a gun, or you rack the slide, or you point out that they're going to get shot. You know, criminals can be deterred. That's why guns have such social utility, because 99% of the time they're not fired. But anyway, the point is it's used as a deterrent for self-defense just by being in my possession. But this is the games that they play to try and avoid this common use test. They're trying to bootstrap it into a different section. But again, common use is not a test per se. Common use is part of a historical analog. Heller said there's no historical law that would ever allow the government to ban any class of firearm that is in, or for that matter, arms. Stun guns was the Kitano case. There's no class of arm that was in common use for lawful purposes that was ever banned by any historical law. So you can't do that. So if the Ninth Circuit gets this methodology right, if they accept what Bruin said and apply it correctly, then that's going to change a lot of cases, not just in the Ninth Circuit, across the country, because it will become persuasive authority. And that's going to be something that's decided by a en banc panel, whether it's the Tedder en banc panel, if there is one created, or Duncan, or some other case. That's the big question. It's not about the magazines per se, or butterfly knives, or semi-autos, or unsafe handguns, or whatever demonized little phrase the gun ban lobby comes up with to try and demonize a subclass of firearms, or a subclass of people, or a subclass of places. It's about that methodology. That's what we're fighting for.
Well, and if it's applied appropriately, the Supreme Court made it very, very difficult in Bruin for pretty much any firearms restrictions to exist. Would you get right down to it?
Not some restrictions, like on manner of carry, and some places, sensitive places, and this is where we're going with the SB2 discussion. You can regulate certain aspects of firearm possession, but what you can't do is ban a whole set or subset of arms that are in common use for lawful purposes.
The other thing I tried to, I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Well, to me, that means, if you have some, $10,000 match grade target rifle, and there's only 200 of them in the country, but this is like the highly, intricately designed target match rifle, but all they use it for is target shooting. That's commonly used for lawful purposes, even though there's not 200,000 of them, as there were stun guns in Kitano, or millions and tens of millions of them as there are with semi-autos, or maybe hundreds of millions of them as there are with magazines. To me, that's not really what the Supreme Court was saying. If people are using a particular type of firearm for a particular lawful purpose, and there's not a whole lot of them, it's still commonly used. Criminals aren't using, $10,000 match grade rifles to commit crimes. So that's going to be another question. I'm kind of going off into the weeds here, but that's another question that's going to have to be answered at some point.
No, and I appreciate you going into the weeds. Actually, one of the things that does encourage me about this whole process as well is some of the clarifications. Well, all of the clarifications in Benitez's decision were stunning. I loved them. But one of the ones that he chastised courts about, and not so much, he chastised the state about, was the idea that they could get a knife analog, the Bowie knife thing, or they reach over here and say, well, there were fire regulations within a 1 square mile area of Manhattan because they had a fire. They said you can only store so much gunpowder in such and such a place and such a building within that 1 square mile, and so that's an analog. But it was a firearm. It was a fire prevention regulation. It had nothing whatever to do with guns. He clarified, and I didn't catch this when I read the Bruin decision, that the Supreme Court has apparently specifically said you have to go back and look for firearm law analogs. The other thing I thought was great that he clarified was that you can't be looking at territories, because the laws in the territories at the time before they became states were pretty wonky, and nobody really ever challenged them.
To the extent there was any law at all. I mean,
right,
no
if there was a law, right?
You know?
And so, to go back and find these obscure things from territories before they became states, he kind of threw that out the window too. So I think these things, if they apply it correctly as he did, truthfully, if you look back at, and I've kind of done a little research on it as much as I can as a layperson, there's not very many analogs at all. There just aren't very many firearms laws during that period, really. So now I think that's why they're reaching into these weird, really unrelated laws, or they're trying to use the firearms regulations which banned freed slaves. Right. Seriously? Or they banned Native Americans. And I'm thinking to myself, if that's the hill the state wants to die on, we're going to use these incredibly racist laws to support our position, they're in trouble. So I'm wondering, does that put us in a good position? It seems to me it does, to defeat these things, even in places perhaps like the Ninth Circuit.
I would say yes, and that's why Every Town Law, Bloomberg's group, is working overtime to churn out creative arguments to twist things so they can give hostile judges or courts, a hook to hang their decision on that twists Bruen and doesn't get stuck on the lack of historical analogs. But again, there are historical laws that do regulate, where you can have a gun, or how you have to carry it, openly or concealed. And there are still dangerous and unusual weapons that can be banned and were banned historically. Pocket pistols or cane guns or something like that. The can't remember what that is called.
None of which are currently
palm pistols.
Yeah, none of which are currently in common use.
Right.
Right. So I mean right. So I mean, there's going to be some limited things that they can outlaw or ban, but they're pretty stinking limited. So I guess the reason why I wanted to go through this is because my feeling is that gun owners are extraordinarily frustrated with the length of time it's taken. We've been in this battle for 30 some odd years, and the length of time it takes. But nevertheless, it seems to me like we got all the cards.
Well, not all the cards. We have 5, maybe 6 votes on the Supreme Court.
Okay.
And the Supreme Court they're going to do something in Rahimi. There's argument in November on it. Rahimi, our amicus briefs are going in day after tomorrow on that case. And there was just an article in the LA Times today about how Kavanaugh is becoming a bit of a swing vote, although he hasn't been a swing vote on gun rights, on the Second Amendment. Elections matter, not just federal, but state elections. And if they change the composition, then there's Newsom pushing the 28th Amendment, which would wipe out the Second Amendment in practice. So they're still in the game, and they're playing a long game, and they're hoping that Bruen at some point could be overturned. But right now there is hope, and we have to just keep fighting. There's a good chance. There's a good reason to have hope. Because things are coming around our way. That methodology is getting settled. The historical laws that they're trying to hold out there as justifications for modern laws are being distinguished and rejected. So, there's a lot of laws.
So we're in better shape than we used to be, but don't relax.
Bingo.
Yeah, we're in better shape than we used to be, but we're not. Nothing's guaranteed. Nothing's 100%. We're winning, but we have to keep the fight going on. We can't relax, it sounds like. All right, well, let's talk about SB2. This is the state trying to make the entire state of California a sensitive place, except maybe inside your house. What's going on with that thing?
Well, so this is their response to Bruen. That and that bill, AB 28, the excise tax, and all the other laws, they're all vindictive, retaliatory responses to the Bruen decision. They're trying to get around Bruen. Bruen said you can ban guns from sensitive places. Well, what is a sensitive place? Well, to me, a sensitive place is like if they have metal detectors, or a police presence, that's a sensitive, at the door, that's a sensitive place. But every other place, every beach and every public park and every train or bus or every other place where the public happens to go, that doesn't make it sensitive. And that's what Justice Thomas said in Bruin. Just because you have police there and it's open to the public doesn't mean it's sensitive. So, but the state of California came up with this laundry list of places that they want to designate as sensitive. So your CCW is invalid there. And also, they put what's become known as the vampire provision in there, where in order for you to have a gun in private property in a retail store or whatever, they want the owner of the storefront to have to post a sign that said guns are allowed. And that's not how trespass laws work. I mean, if you want to stop somebody from coming into your private property with a firearm, you can tell them you're not allowed here. That's not government action. The private property owners do not have to respect the Second Amendment. But the law in all the other states is you post a sign that says no guns allowed. And then people know they can't bring their gun in there. And that's the way it ought to work. California wants to flip that because they know that most stores are not going to post a sign that says guns allowed. So we're challenging that. We've filed a lawsuit challenging most of these sensitive places as not being truly sensitive and challenging that vampire provision. And we filed our lawsuit before Newsom even signed the bill. We filed the lawsuit a week earlier and then served the state the day he signed the bill, negotiated a briefing schedule with the state within 2 days, filed a stipulation for a briefing schedule and a hearing date. We now have a hearing date on November 4th to decide whether or not SB2 can be enforced. Now, there's another part of SB2 which makes the qualification to get a CCW harder, but we're going to have to take that. There's been some questions in some of the other cases across the country, Hawaii, New York, on sensitive places, where the courts have said you don't have legal standing to challenge this unless you are actually, if you're challenging guns on a subway, does your plaintiff ride the subway? And if you're denied, you can't just challenge the character references or the other requirements to qualify for a permit until you're denied. So we'll be looking for people who are denied and then bring lawsuits for those people challenging some of the sketchy justifications for the standards that they're holding people to get a CCW.
So what are the new standards if that law, first of all, that law would not go into effect until January 1 if it does, right? What are if you happen to know, what are some of the new things they want to do?
Character references, you have to have a clean social media presence. I don't remember them all, to tell you the truth, off the top of my head right now. And then there's also going to be, very expensive training requirements. In fact, we're getting ready to sue the County of Los Angeles, the LA County Sheriff, because they're taking a year to issue CCWs. And then we're getting ready to challenge a couple cities in LA County because they're charging $1,000 for the CCW. Those are the kind of things that they want to do to throw roadblocks in the way, because they no longer have good cause requirement to use as an excuse for not issuing CCW.
So so when you talk about $1,000, I think of a poll tax.
That's exactly what it is.
Off the top of my head. You're charging me a fee to vote. You're charging me a fee to exercise a constitutionally protected right. And as I think about all of my constitutionally protected rights, I can't think of one. Maybe there's another one. I cannot think of another one that requires me to get government permission, get a background check, and pay a government fee or take a class in order to exercise that right. Am I on track here? Because I can't think of another one. The state
can charge some administrative costs, to get a parade permit, to have, hold a parade or whatever. But they can't, in a First Amendment context, but they can't put it to the point where, they're trying to price people out of the market. The exorbitant CCW application fee or processing fee, that's right in there with AB 28, the 11% excise tax on guns and ammo. They're trying to price people out of the market. This is part of Newsom and the Sacramento politicians who do not like guns or gun owners their effort to eradicate the gun culture. It's culture side. They want to make it impossible to own a gun for as many people as possible by putting red tape in the way and making it too expensive for a lot of people. So we're fighting that at every turn too. We're putting together a coalition to fight the excise tax. That doesn't go into effect for a little while longer, so we have a little time on that. But we'll be challenging that too. So,
is there Chuck? I'm like I said, I'm not an attorney, and you know that. Is there a racist component to that, or is it because a lot of the folks in California who make less money, they live in a lower socioeconomic area, are people of color, for example, and now we put them in a position where now we got folks who live in the inner city. Good night. If anybody needs a permit to carry a gun, they certainly do.
Most.
Right? And so now we put them in a position where they can't get a permit because it costs $1,000 or whatever it costs, and they don't have $1,000. Or they can't buy the gun because they're already the sales tax in this state is kind of absurd. But you also have the cost of the DROS and all these other fees, and now they want to add 11% on top of that. We're pricing people out so that only the wealthy are going to be able to do this, and anybody else is not. Is that a part of this argument?
Well, there are poor people of all races, colors, and creeds.
Of course, but I'm saying we're taking the people who don't have any money, who live in a rotten part of town, regardless of what color they are.
Need it the most.
And they need it the most.
Yeah, they're the ones who will be most. This is what all gun laws do this. They take the ability of a person to defend themselves away, whether it's through high taxes or high fees or a law that prohibits them from having a certain type of firearm, and they turn those people into victims. There's a lot of focus on the victims of the crazy criminals, and as there should be, because nobody wants we don't want anybody shot. And I am a parent. I don't want that happening. I want my schools to be safe. But by the same token, when you don't give people the ability to defend themselves or put someone in there who can defend others, you are creating more victims. And that's what all these gun laws do, and that's what this tax has done. This is the whole theory of Newsom is big government will solve all your problems. Big government will keep you safe. Well, no, never have, never will. It's all pretext because of a fundamental difference in perspective. Individualism, protecting yourself versus government, nanny state dependence. And the ultra progressives like Newsom believe that the government can solve everything. Of course, to me, the government could screw up a wet dream.
So where are we in the status of this thing? You guys are you trying to get a stay on it? Is that what we're doing right now?
We're moving for a preliminary injunction. That hearing will be held November 4th.
Okay.
So we have plenty of time to, December 4th. So we have plenty of time to do our briefs and get in front of the judge, and he will be able to decide before the first of the year when SB2 would kick in.
What do you think our odds are?
I think they're very good. We're in front of the same judge who ruled in our favor on the challenge to the roster, so he gets it. He's a very thoughtful judge who will probably have an evidentiary hearing. We'll probably be down there for a couple of days if he does it like he did with the roster challenge. He'll have witnesses, and it'll be like a mini trial. But at the end of the day, and because he and just like Judge Benitez, they've been very thorough. They know they're going to be appealed. They document the case. They give the state every opportunity to put in whatever evidence it wants to put in. But remember, on the sensitive places, California's a year late because 918 lost last year by one vote because they had it was an urgency measure, required a 2/3 vote. So he didn't make it urgent this time around. But in the meantime, in the last year, Hawaii's law has been enjoined. New York's law has been enjoined. There's been a couple other sensitive place laws that have been enjoined by the court. So we have all this authority, legal precedent to point out to the judge in the SB2 case that other courts have already ruled. So that increases our chances fairly dramatically, I think.
Where are we with the whole 11% thing? I don't even know when that becomes law. So,
well, we're working, a lot of that, it falls on the industry, the taxes imposed on the industry, manufacturers and retailers. So we're working with some of the trade associations and manufacturers to try and put that case together. But it's been litigated in Cook County, Illinois. That county tried to do it and they lost. It's still in litigation, but they've lost. They're trying to save it, but you're right. It's a poll tax. It's a tax on a constitutional right, and it's exorbitant. And here's the thing that rubs me. Newsom is up. He calls it a sin tax. Okay. Well, hold on. This is not tobacco or liquor. You don't have a constitutional right to smoke a cigarette or buy alcohol, but you do have a constitutional right to acquire and possess firearm. So you can't put a sin tax on that, which, by the way, it's not a sin, and gun owners are not sinners. So what are you doing? And the real fraud of this whole thing is exposed when you realize they're predicting this tax will raise $150 million. California's budget is $31 billion. And they're going to take this $150 million and they're going to harden schools. They're going to put school safeguards in place in schools. They're going to put, gang rehabilitation programs in place.
No, they're not. No, how many times have they promised that exactly thing? How many times have they taxed us more and said they're going to fix all the potholes in the darn roads and they don't do that? Right. No, that's a bunch of baloney.
So worthwhile, if those programs are so critical, which is what Newsom and his
you got the money, just do them
already. Why didn't you do it before?
Look, okay, so what other blue resistance nonsense did they pass through the legislature and sign that we're fighting?
I don't even know yet. I haven't even had a chance to look. I've been focusing on SB2 and AB 28, but there's 24 bills. CRPA.
Wait, what? 24?
Almost 24, yeah.
Okay.
Well, a lot of them are regulations requiring like gun retailers to videotape every transaction and stuff like that. Stuff that makes it more red tape and more expensive to own a gun, run a gun store. But there's a lot. CRPA will be putting out a recap of all this. Folks should really make sure you subscribe there to get those bulletins.
Yeah, I'll put a link in the description so you can go directly there, by the way.
Yeah, and we'll be it's a target-rich environment for gun lawyers and gun rights associations. And by the way, I should point out that on SB2, one of the things that Newsom is trying to do is overwhelm us, pass so many laws that we can't keep up. We can't fund all the litigation that it takes to challenge them all. And so what Newsom has done, though, is caused Gun Owners of America, Gun Owners of California, CRPA, Second Amendment Foundation. Those are all plaintiffs that have come together that really weren't working together before. We're now working together because we're forming these partnerships, these strategic partnerships to combat Newsom and what he's pushing.
24 bills. Okay, so that brings up another question, and you mentioned overwhelming us. As we get, this is my hopeful statement. As we get more and more victories in the courts, and we establish more and more case law supporting the Second Amendment protected right, does it then become? I don't think it's ever going to be harder for legislatures like California to just keep passing laws and governors keep signing them. But does it become easier for us to knock them down as we have more case law established, or are we always going to be in this kind of 3-year, 4-year fight with these individual laws?
It will become easier because the methodology will become clearer, but also the major issues, semi-autos, magazines, whatever, unsafe handguns, Saturday night specials, those kinds of like the set of prohibited people, what people can be prohibited, what places can firearms be prohibited from. Those are the kind of the centerpiece gun laws that every town law comes up with and pushes to states across the country to try and get them to pass those. As those issues are resolved, the issues are going to become narrower and narrower and narrower. And it will be, smaller and smaller questions of law. Is this guy, can you prohibit this guy from owning, this particular one person from owning a gun? Can you require anybody who has a TRO, any kind of TRO, to get rid of a gun? What kind of character do you have to have? What's good character versus bad character to get a concealed carry permit? It'll get, and who knows what, the issues that will come out of this will become more and more refined and more focused, and the cases will be narrower and narrower as time goes by. But it's these big ones that we need to get out of the way on the front end. And again, Rahimi, it's a double-edged sword. That's not a guy that we want as a poster child, but the court could use that case as an opportunity to settle this methodology issue, but it might water it down to try and keep him prohibited from that restraining order.
Well, I think it's interesting that the court, we're looking at this, some of these jurisdictions, and obviously California wanting to include your social media. And if I remember Bruin correctly, one of the things that they focused, that was in Bruin, and I could be wrong about this, was that you cannot use a subjective criteria.
Right.
It has to be objective. And obviously, some bureaucrat looking at your social media and deciding this is offensive and this is not. Anyway, so I'll let you comment on that. Go ahead. But that just seems awfully subjective.
Look,
to me.
This is where it's going to become gray. See, look, if somebody posts on social media, I'm going to go to the courthouse tomorrow and kill somebody, it's probably not going to be really favorably viewed by somebody who's deciding whether to give you a CCW or not. But if you're talking about politics, see, this is where the demonized classification comes in, where we talked last time we were on about Rahimi and about how that case deals with somebody who's restricted from owning guns because he has a restraining order. There's also nonviolent felons, there's cannabis users, and what's going to be next? Paramilitary patriots? So depending on what you're posting or looking at on social media, if it's political, they might attribute dangerousness to you because of your political views. And that's where the real trouble hits. That's when the government judges you, not the government, some licensing guy sitting in an office at the police station decides that he doesn't like what you posted and he thinks it might be dangerous, because a lot of people who advocate the Second Amendment are considered, they're not they're
dangerous,
people
right?
People who want to ban guns are threatened by us. And
it might have.
Them.
And here's the concern, obviously, if somebody is advocating violent criminal activity, that's actually I don't think that's legal to do in a public forum anyway. Yeah. Right. And so for obvious reasons, you're fomenting violence. I mean, obviously that's not a good thing, but because you are a combination of, I'm a gun owner and I disagree with whatever the acceptable political or social or view is at the moment, because I'm a gun owner and I disagree with the favored view, whatever that may be, because they change. Now suddenly I can't have a permit. That's where it gets ridiculously subjective. And so I don't have and you said other states have tried this. You mentioned, for example, New York trying the sensitive places thing. Where did that land in New York? Is it still in court, or did they get? That's in the second.
If I remember correctly, that's still in the Second Circuit. We're waiting for a ruling from the Second Circuit Court of Appeals.
And so if circuits disagree, that's when the Supreme Court grabs it. So if we get a ruling different in the Ninth than we get in the Second, and they have a disparity, a disagreement, is that when the Supreme Court then looks at that?
Classically, typically that's what causes the Supreme Court to take a case for review. But with an emerging judicial doctrine like Second Amendment and Bruin, they won't wait for a circuit split necessarily to accept a case for review. They'll take it sooner because they know when a decision is wrong, and they know that, like the Ninth Circuit, may bend over backwards to twist Bruin, and they don't. The current composition of the United States Supreme Court does not want to let that happen again, because they saw that happen after Heller, and they don't want to let another 12 years go by before they straighten things out on Bruin.
Okay, which brings up the next question. We talked about the election. Obviously, presidential elections are extremely important because presidents appoint justices and then they're confirmed by the Senate. So the congressional elections in the United States, Senate and Congress, and the presidential election is vital if we want to save our country, basically, if we want to make sure that we keep the constitution of the court the same. That having been said, some of the justices that would help us are getting up there in years.
Yeah.
Is it your feeling that these justices are going to stick around long enough to settle this as much as possible before they go, or are some of them itching to retire? What is your thought?
Well, Thomas and Alito are our strongest advocates, probably. I don't think they're going anywhere. But yeah, I mean, who knows? This is like, Justice Ginsburg. I mean, she didn't leave and she died in office. Died in as a judge, as a justice. So did
Scalia, rather shockingly and suddenly. So yeah. Right.
So I mean, if a Democrat gets elected, you're probably going to see them try to hold out for another 4 years. If a Republican gets elected, then some of them may choose to retire to give the Republican president a chance to appoint their replacement.
Very, very interesting. All right, Chuck, last thoughts? Anything else we should talk about that we didn't?
Just stay informed, stay involved. We need everybody on board here. Obviously, Bloomberg has a lot of money and push a lot of bills. They're trying to overwhelm us, but we are coming together. But we still need everybody helping out to the extent you can. But even if you can't, please donate if you can. But if you can't, stay informed. Spread the word on social media. Don't let people get away with demonizing us or stigmatizing gun ownership. By the way, if people get into policy arguments, I strongly recommend a website, gunfacts.org, or it might be gunfacts.info, that sets the record straight on a lot of this stuff. There's a lot of baloney going around in statistics that the gun ban lobby cites, and they often leave out critical factors, like suicides are a big factor of gun deaths, and they call it violent crime, but it's not. So that skews the result, makes it appear one way when it's really something else. That's the kind of games they play. But so you got to stay informed, stay involved, stay plugged in, and do what you can.
Thank you, Chuck. I really appreciate you spending the time today. Have a great week.
Always a pleasure. You too. Oh, don't forget, watch this Friday. Benitez has 3 more cases. So we're waiting for 3 more cases to come down.
On Friday?
No, whenever. But I think he's going to do one.
I'm hoping. I'm going to watch on Friday.
I've got the vibes. I think something's coming Friday.
He's feeling the vibes. Chuck, thanks, man. Have a great week.
All right, you too.
All righty. Thank you very much for watching the entire interview. Once again, I want to encourage you to support CRPA, the Second Amendment Law Center. Support the organization you want to support. As we mentioned in the interview, they're all working together. Please help me as well. I would really appreciate it if you would join GunGuyTV Crew. It's very inexpensive to do, and you can do it by going to GunGuyTVCrew.com. Or if you're already on Locals or Patreon, I prefer Locals because they're not anti-gun. Patreon kind of is. But go to the one that you like the best and look for Gun Guy TV. You can support me over there. That helps me continue doing, hopefully, what you think is the good work I do. I think it's good. But again, that's pretty much up to you. Have a great week. Thank you again. Wherever you go, whatever you do, stay safe.